Okay, welcome back to Aginspire. And the idea of Aginspire is to have interesting conversations with people in agriculture doing inspiring things. And my next guest, who I've known for a few years now, is a sheep farmer, a milliner, involved in agri-tourism, an author, social media influencer, Farming for Nature Ambassador 2020, and involved in the regenerative agriculture movement in Ireland. And I think that's only scratching the surface, maybe. Good morning, Suzanna Crampton. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you very much. Hello, Tommy. How are you?
I probably left things out there, Suzanna, but we're going to talk about a lot of stuff to do with your own farm and everything like that. But it's a few years now since I've met you, and what I've tried to do with these conversations so far is maybe to see where people are and they're going, is to have a look back at their experiences in agriculture and how they got to where they are. You're farming in Kilkenny at the moment, like we mentioned. But can you tell people, and lots of people will know you, but a little bit about your own background and kind of role into agriculture, and you're real passionate about farming and the environment?
Yes, well, basically, I used to come here as a child. Children were very inexpensive to fly across the Atlantic in those days. And I loved working with my grandfather here in the market garden, picking the soft fruits and vegetables and selling them in the local markets and things like that. And subsequently, I ended up going to an agricultural college in Vermont called Stirling College. And it was also had a secondary title called the Grassroots Project. And it was basically farming with nature, forestry, wildlife. It was kind of wrapping all of those together. One of the Bibles of this school was this old book called Soil and Civilization.
Okay. Who's the author of that book, Susanna?
I never remember his name. Edward Haynes. Okay. Hyams. And it's all to do with soils and civilizations, and the degradation of soils usually leads to the crumbling of civilizations and the end of them. I think recently, in the last number of years, they've discovered that that's what happened on Easter Island. Was they'd drained their soils so much that they starved to death and warred against each other and things like that. And that was how the demise of Easter Island occurred. Now, those are anthropologists. But then you can see other examples. For example, after I went to Stirling College, Agricultural College in Vermont, I came over here to Ireland and did my lambing apprenticeships in Wicklow and Carlow during lambing seasons. But then in subsequent years, I did a whole load of other jobs, from bartending, waitressing, maids in hotels, to all kinds of things. But it led me ultimately, I was living in London and I started working for this I was working at a small animal veterinary practice in North London. And I was raising funds for a ride that I was going to go on across the United States, following the diaries of this amazing man called Teshfali, Lewis and Clark, this amazing woman in the 1800s called Lydia Bird, and the pilgrim, not the pilgrim, who were the people that went across the US in the caravans? The pilgrims or whatever. Oh, I'm being stupid now that I can't think what these people were called. But their diaries and letters home of going in these covered wagons across the United States. For example, when they were crossing the Snake River and it took days and the water was really shallow, and their descriptions of it. And so I was going to ride across the United States with a dog and a couple of horses and compare and contrast what the modern life is like in those particular places where these diaries were. And I was on the phone at the veterinary practice with one of my funders, and a sub-vet was in at the time, and she overheard me talking on the phone with this man who was one of the men who was going to subsidize my trip. And she said she was starting this wildlife charity. Now, this is before the internet and everything. And it was called the Wildlife Information Network. It subsequently became called that. And it was to do with animal husbandry and veterinary medicine, to do with wild, rare, and exotic species in Southeast Asia. So I said, yes, I'll join you. And some of the people who were funding my ride came with me, and some said, okay, we'll wait until you've done this and we'll come back to you then. So it was based in London Zoo for a period of time, and then it moved to the Royal Veterinary College in London. And this took me out to Southeast Asia, where I was collecting and collating veterinary medicine and animal husbandry for rare and exotic species. So for example, you as a vet would know that if you're going to dope a cow or a horse, there's a required amount of dope. Whereas if you have antelope, you have, let's say there's 3 different species of antelope. Each one is the same body weight, but each one, the same dose will kill one, make one go hyperactive, and will be appropriate for the third. So it was basically collecting and collating this information so that the veterinary and animal husbandry information could be dispersed. And you couldn't Google it in those days. So I was going around to zoos, wildlife parks, into rainforest conferences. And this also, I was in Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, and Borneo. And this also ended up exposing me to the destruction of the rainforest and seeing the palm oil plantations being put in, meeting tribesmen and seeing their world being destroyed, where they lived off of pigs in the rainforest and how they survived. For example, I have this amazing photograph that I took where this man, this rainforest lake, if you will, and there's this ginormous fern hanging over him. And you see the man in the distance and he's tiny versus the fern. And I now know that that place is gone now and has now been kind of bulldozed or exploded into a level area for palm oil. So I helped with orangutans, resuscitating them. There's amazing photographs where I was, of me, where I was photographing orangutans who were fed, who were stolen from the wild and fed the wrong food, so they couldn't develop properly. So they were kind of like paralyzed from the waist down. And this amazing German woman was helping them learn how to climb again and feeding them the correct diet. And whenever I visited her, there was this one tiny baby orangutan who would scream and scream and scream and scream until it could attach itself to me. And I would carry it around. So there's photographs of me photographing these orangutans on their climbing frames with this baby orangutan hanging on to me. You could also say I'm one of the few farmers who has not only milked cows, sheep, goats, horses, but I've also milked snakes.
Wow.
So
how do you milk a snake, Suzanna?
You milk a snake. There's a jar or glass or plastic goblet, and you have plastic tightly put over it, and you get the snake by the head and you squeeze it. You know how the snake's jaw deforms out to when it's eating. Well, you pop open the jaw as it naturally does, and you take the fangs and you put the fangs through the plastic and pull it, squeezing the poison packets behind the teeth. And then the poison comes out of the teeth and dribbles down the side of the glass.
Not a job for the faint-hearted, I imagine. Certainly a bit more difficult than milking cows.
A little bit more difficult than milking cows.
A little bit more dangerous, maybe, as well. Susanna, and I know you could probably spend hours talking about your experiences. If I went back and I met you when you were in Southeast Asia, what would you have described yourself at that time? Were you an environmentalist? Did you not put a title on what you were doing? You know, if a younger version of yourself, what was the aim back then? Or were you just going through those experiences and see what came next? Or did you have a plan?
I don't think at that stage, I don't think I had a plan. I've always been a rover and a wanderer. I mean, in those days, you didn't have cheap airlines, and you didn't have airlines like FedEx or DHL. What you could do traveling back and forth across the Atlantic like I did is you could get a ticket for $50, and that ticket, you sold your baggage compartment. And so you only had the carry-on. So it was very inexpensive. It didn't, if you were a normal passenger, it would have cost you £400-500 pounds or something to fly one way across the Atlantic. And to me, I mean, when I was landing in Wicklow and Carlow, a month living on the farm was 450 Irish pounds, including room and board. But that's all I got. And lambing in those days, it was 24/7. So it would be 5 to 6 weeks of living on the farm and just living in the sheep shed. So that was, I wouldn't know what that was hourly, but not very much hourly. No. So if I earned 450, a £50 ticket was not very much. So I wasn't spending the 400 or 500 pound ticket if I was going back to the United States or going over to the UK. Over to the UK, you could hitchhike via the lorries, the meat lorries.
Yeah.
And that you could get on the ferry and go across as a passenger in those days. And then you'd go down to the meat district in London and you could come back. I only did that once or twice because being a woman, it's kind of dicey doing those kind of things. But a lot of times that's how I would go back and forth to London economically. But I think I was never looking for married life. I wasn't looking for children. I think at a very early age, I think I was 14 when I had a riding accident where a horse flipped over a fence and landed on top of me and nearly killed me. And since then, I've had a whole sequence of events where I've essentially knocked on death's door. And I think what that did for me was made me interested in living life. So when I was in Southeast Asia, I was really enjoying learning everything I could about there, learning and understanding the destruction of what was happening there, both to the tribal communities and to the wildlife, but also understanding, you know, a lot of people need to eat, a lot of history, learning about a lot of the history out there, things like that. I was always interested in learning. It was something that my grandfather, my Irish grandfather, taught me at an early age. Is I'd ask a question about something and he'd hand me a book and he'd say, read that and then come back and we'll have a conversation. So I was very lucky in that respect, is that my mind via my family was always stimulated. So I was always curious to learn more. So I think I've always been, I don't think I'd ever have labeled myself an environmentalist, but I think I have essentially always been one, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, and I'm not trying to label you at all, but I'm just trying to understand what is a fascinating journey. And I think when you talk about your experiences of close to death and maybe that appreciation for life, some of us look at life and say, yeah, I should do this and I should do that, and we probably don't live it to its fullest. And it's and you hear stories like that, and they're romantic, and you think about it, but a lot of us get locked up, and probably life sometimes for a lot of people passes them by, and they don't get to experience all those things. But one of the things you mentioned there, and it's come up every time I've talked to people, and maybe it's my bias towards who I'm talking to, is curiosity. And the curiosity is a fantastic thing. Before we start talking about your own farm, you must have met lots of interesting people along those journey, at different stages of that.
Fascinating people. I mean, that could be another whole hour.
any one or two people that stand out that might be kind of that bestowed wisdom upon you during those years that you still remember, that come into your mind now, that you thought maybe gave you life lessons that you could share with us?
Oh, in those days, there were so many people, so many people. There was a couple that I worked for in England that were kind of friends of the family, and they were goat farmers. And he was a clockmaker. And he made a clock that is the closest man-made clock to nuclear time. Amazing, what are they called? Not an ornithologist, a clockmaker, whatever the clockmakers are called. My brain.
I'm very poor. I should be backing up with this knowledge, but I don't have it either.
No, don't worry, don't worry. It's not there's a name for a clockmaker, and I can't think of it. But they had goats, and we were collecting the hay. And I remember having a question, asking them, why don't you have any children? And they said, because having a child is what's damaging the environment. It's the population. And since then, this would have been back in 1985 or 6. And it was one of the first times that I really thought about the reproduction of the human race and how it is, we are the most unenvironmentally friendly aspect that is happening in the environment, is populating the earth. And I think that was one thing that really struck a chord with me. In a sense, I was very lucky. I was never broody. I never looked to have children or thought about it.
That resonates with me as a father of 5 young children. I'm part of the environmental challenge. We're certainly doing our not helping the situation in our household. It is a very complicated debate, obviously.
It's a hugely complicated debate. So, I mean, I don't hold people. I don't hold people to account to this at all whatsoever. I love children. I love teaching children. I have nephews and nieces, and I love having them around. That was just one of my chosen paths. You could say another really interesting conversation more recently that I had was with a writer, poet, environmentalist, farmer called Wendell Berry. When I went and visited him in Kentucky, in 2017. I went over to the USA, and I was giving a series of talks in different locations in Virginia, in New Jersey, etc. And I also went to this amazing Amish event in Pennsylvania called Horse Progress, where you see they were demonstrating, for example, the first non-petrol or diesel hay mower that was designed between some Amish and some German engineers. And it was the hot new thing, because then the Amish wouldn't have to have the petrol engine to drive the blade to cut the hay. And it was amazing to see this machine that was literally all cogs and driving. Anyway, back to where I was Wendell Berry. I went and visited him on his farm in Kentucky. And we had a really interesting conversation. And essentially, you're only supposed to stay and have a conversation with an hour. I ended up being with him for 4 hours. He took me around his farm. I met his horses. I saw what he was doing. I had a wonderful afternoon of 4 or 5 hours with him and my friend who drove me there. And he said a very interesting thing, which was that we're losing community and we're losing sense of community. And with the way farms are more and more industrialized and the equipment is taking over so many jobs, there's fewer and fewer people on the farm. So there's less and less of a community in rural areas. And he was very worried about the demise of the rural community. And he said, if you look at the Amish, now this was before I went to Horse Progress. He said, if you look at the Amish, they have an incredible sense of community. He said, take the religious aspect out. They have a really good sense of community. They all get together and help each other out for things. And he said that a lot of the time is now missing in the farming community. And I think reflecting on that, even years after I went and had this conversation with him, it is so true. And if you want to look at a positive of the recent times with the COVID around here is a sense of community has returned. And people are having conversations with people to genuinely find out how they're doing. Not the, how are you, continue on with the conversation. And that to me has been one of the most positive things, is people are getting to know their neighbors again, and communities are waking up again, or re-evolving into these modern times using the technology like this. But to me, that really resonated with me, particularly when I then went to Horse Progress, and all the children were helping on the fair and festivities. You go to a fair or festivity in Ireland, England, the USA, where children are involved, and 9 times out of 10, you will bump into a squalling child that's frustrated, annoyed, etc., etc. None of that was there. It was all the community, everybody. You know, if I was feeling faint at one time because the heat was horrendous, and coming from Ireland, I wasn't used to the heat. So I had to go and get shelter. And these women came over and said, are you, because I must have looked drained, like white as a sheet. And they said, are you okay? And I said, oh, I love some water. They were like rushing off, getting water, minding me, giving me a damp cloth over the back of my neck. And I'm not saying that wouldn't happen here, but it was, or in the USA or in the UK. But the lack of frustrated, screaming children was remarkable. And they were all ages. And it was a fascinating kind of aspect, which I think COVID has reawakened the sense of community and caring. Not that it wasn't there before, but it is now accentuated and expanded out, I think.
Yeah, a couple of things there on community, and I think it's not just a rural issue, because you could have a lot of people in a city or a town, and there's that sense of community is probably something that's not just a rural issue. You might have a lot of people in an area, but they mightn't know each other. And if you certainly can get a cure for frustrated, crying children, I will be, count me in for that, Suzanna. So, Suzanna, let's take it to where you are now. You're farming with Kilkenny. We mentioned your sheep farming, you're involved in agri-tourism. Just tell people a little bit about your farm and your farming business as it is at the moment.
Okay, well, the farm has been in my family for about 8 generations. My family first came here and rented here from about 1800 to 1850. And sometime in the 1850s, my family bought here. And it is my mother's side of the family. My father's American, which is where my mid-Atlantean accent comes from. And so this farm has been in my family for quite a few generations. And it's a small acreage. It's only about 50 acres. A large percentage of that is rented to another farmer. The land and the house and everything is still my mother's. So I am kind of a caretaker here, and another farmer rents the best fields down by the river. And then I have about 12 acres around the house, which I farm with the Zwarbtles sheep, which is from Friesland, where Frisian cattle came from and Frisian sheep came from. And the Zwarbtles sheep I got involved with a number of years ago when a friend of mine came over and saw me with my Suffolks, which I borrowed his Texel ram. And he said, you're at nothing on that acreage to go to make a living. At the time I was teaching photography as well, my income. I was teaching photography in Kilkenny about 4 days a week and about 3 nights a week in between Kilkenny and Thomastown. And he said, you're at nothing. Either you have to go into rare breeds, or you have to go into the high-end pedigree of a particular commercial breed. And I could, at that stage, if you wanted to go high-end pedigree flock to produce brilliant rams or any of those kind of things, you needed like 25,000 pounds, and I wasn't even earning near that. So I went the rare breed route, and the ploughing championships was here. It was just up the road at Danesfort. And when I went in the sheep sheds, there were the Zwarbtles sheep, and I said, oh, I like the look of them. They're kind of a chic sheep. And I looked into their history, and they're a dairy breed. They have a really nice fleece, and they have a delicious sweet meat. And so they're a kind of a trifecta breed, because you can farm them for all three at the same time. I'm only at the moment farming them for the meat and the wool. And someday I would love to be able to milk them, because I make some mean sheep's milk ice cream.
Okay.
And delicious stuff. Ooh, you'd be salivating if you had some of my ice cream. Pavlovian effect.
How would you not have to then go down the route of separating the lambs to milk them, or would you milk the excess milk? How would that work with them? Like if you look at traditional sheep milk.
Traditionally, this book here was published in 1800.
Wow, that's an old.
And in it, my great grandfather writes about the local sheep here in Kilkenny, which were dairy sheep.
Okay. And
a sheep flock would be assessed as to how many cheeses they produced. Historically, sheep's milk and sheep cheese lasted longer during the time of unpasteurized dairy products. So your dairy for cows had to be consumed much more quickly than sheep's milk or sheep cheeses. So a sheep flock in this area would have been assessed as to how many cheeses they produced per week, and that you could bring and sell in Kilkenny. And there was a fascinating conference last year or the year before, I can't remember, times kind of here in Kilkenny, to do with agricultural history. And it was absolutely, you would have been fascinated by it, about, you know, how hedgerows are actually a recent phenomenon, because the fields around here would have been plowed with huge teams of oxen, and they take a huge amount of space to turn around. So it wasn't until horses got mixed in with the oxen and plowing that the fields got smaller. Fascinating series of how agricultural history in Ireland. Oh, in the west of Ireland was for cows, and the Roman army was supplied by cows from the west of Ireland, which were shipped to the Roman army, which is one of the reasons why they didn't invade Ireland. I mean, fascinating conference over 2 days. Anyway, while I was there, I asked one of the curators of Roath House, which is a merchant house in Kilkenny. And I said, is there any evidence of sheep cheese being sold on to the UK? Because they would have about grains and woven fabrics and things like that, or wool being shipped over to the UK on boats as the Roath House merchant thing. She said, I don't know. And the next day she came to me and she said, actually, we do have an interesting docket showing that in the, I don't know if it was the 16 or 17 somethings, about a shipment of sheep cheese leaving Kilkenny to go to and be shipped to the UK, because it could last longer unpasteurized. And I found that absolutely fascinating. But to get back to what you're talking about, if I was to do it, a lot of the traditional dairy sheep farms around the Mediterranean, which is full of different breeds of dairy sheep, what they would do is they would allow the lambs onto the ewes during the daylight hours out in the fields. Then they would bring the lambs in and they'd separate them out. The ewes, others would fill up. They'd milk them, and then they'd turn the ewes out and the lambs would follow. So it's kind of like there's a dairy farms in the UK, growing in number actually, where they leave calves on the cows and they milk off the excess, called calf at foot dairying. And so I would kind of try and do it in a more traditional Mediterranean way than what several of the people, there's quite a few sheep dairy farmers here in Ireland. And that way I'd only have to do once a day milking, and the lambs then would be weaned off at 6 weeks rather than 8 weeks, being that 6 weeks is what the medium age of what a lot of the sheep dairy farmers do that are producing the cheeses around the Mediterranean and things, rather than the 8 weeks for the meat. And generally lambs are actually quite fine at that stage. And because they have the absence of the mothers during the night, they're more likely to start eating solid foods and moving forward in their development than those that are with them 24/7, if that makes it, or there for the 8 weeks.
That makes sense to me. One of the things, obviously, with the acreage that you're talking about, it's not what you would say, it's not a common farm in Ireland. It's what we might describe as a small holding. You've got to be industrious, and which you completely are. You've got your woolen blanket behind you, you've written books, you're very active on social media, but you also have agri-tourism as part of that. You have a lot of visitors. How has COVID-19 affected your business, Suzanna? Has that put you under pressure, or you know, are you looking at new ways of engaging with people? Or it's like for lots of people, for lots of different reasons, it's been a challenge. But I presume because you're so industrious with your acreage that you have, it has created challenges for you, because there's parts of your income that must be gone.
Yes, well, parts of the income, definitely. I would have, at this stage, I would have had a lot of small tour groups, like 1 or 2 or 5 people, but I also would have had big tour groups. I think at this stage there's like 7 or 8 that would have been busloads. So that would have been 25 to 40 people. And each one of the, you know, it's per head, and they would come in and they'd possibly buy blankets and yarn and cards and calendars and books, which are all for sale here. That part of my income is really only very recent. Previous to that, it was the blankets and the cards and things like that. But more and more people, because of my presence on social media, have wanted to call in and have conversations and walk around the farms that they see on the videos. And during COVID, what I had the worst lambing in years, in that I lost a few too many ewes. Basically, when I was lambing, the temperature was going from below freezing to really hot. Like you'd have 3 days of really cold, then 3 days of, I don't know if you remember, but this spring it was yo-yoing like crazy. So I ended up losing too many ewes to pneumonia. I would throw the whole chemistry at them, the antibiotics, everything. So I ended up having about 8 bottle lambs, which is the most I've ever had to look after with my small flock. And what I did was, for all those people, particularly the people who were stuck in tiny apartments all over the world, was I videoed myself bottle feeding these 8 lambs. And since that, the number of views has created an income for me on YouTube. It's not a substantial income, but it's the beginning of an income. And previous to that, the broadband wasn't good enough. It would to upload a 2-minute video would take hours. I'd have to go and stand on top of the hill over there with 2 towers cross-referencing my tiny little phone to upload a video. But subsequently, broadband has got improved in the last 18 months around here. So I was able to do that. So that's how I've increased, given myself another income, because you've got to think, I've been selling ewes, lambs this spring. I'll be selling meat in the autumn. I have the yarn from the alpaca and the sheep. I have the blankets, I have the cards, I have the calendars, I have the book, and then I also have the tour groups. So it's having as many different pies as possible, but they're all based around the one thing, which is farming regeneratively, farming with nature, and with the aspect on social media. Basically, it's a value-added farm product is what I've created, from not just farming sheep to send to the marsh or to send to the factory. All of my sheep go to private citizens as a half or a whole or then I've even got tour groups who come here for a meal. And so I'm cooking them lamb stew or shepherd's pie, something else for the vegetarians and vegans if they're part of the knitting group or the food group that are coming. But that adds value as well to as a value-added product for these tour groups.
It's incredible diversity from what we would traditionally call maybe a smaller holding. You're an ambassador for nature, and you've mentioned nature throughout your journey through life. And anyone who knows you and follows you on social media, you have a huge affection and love for animals, dogs, cats. You have a book.
And dung beetles.
Dung beetles. Talk to me about being an ambassador for nature, for Farming with Nature in 2020, what that means, and explain to people a little bit about that. Because it's a conversation, you know, I work very much in commercial agriculture, and it interests me, these conversations. I work in traditional farming systems, and to me they're working well, and I suppose I often think I stand in the middle trying to learn from people about what might be coming, and having a very open mind, but it's sort of away from what I'm doing on my normal day-to-day basis. But talk to me about Farming with Nature, because it's something a lot of people are getting interested in, consumers are interested in. From a political level, the environment is our biggest challenge. There's no doubt about that over the next 30 or 40 years. And I look at this, and I've said it on many of these chats, is that I look at it as a father of 5 kids more so than anything, that the future, it's the world that they're going to grow up in. But talk to me a little bit about what Farming for Nature is about and being an ambassador is about.
Well, Farming for Nature is essentially an add-on to what I've been doing for years, which is regenerative farming, which is farming for the soil, to improve the health of the soil, the fungus, the microbiology, and all those kind of things. So being an ambassador means that I suppose I've been talking on radio and television and things like that more, and on print media about Farming for Nature, and how a diverse farmland is very important and also highly productive to farmers. For example, you as a vet, let me see, where's this thing? There it is. For example, you as a vet would be interested in dandelions. And that now, traditionally, dandelions were called dairyman's gold. They traditionally came on the land. This is not the hawksweed. We know that the dandelion is in the sunflower family, under which is the hawksweed family, under which is the dandelion family. And there's a large variety of dandelions, like there's a large variety of hawksweeds, but a lot of people lump them all together. But the traditional dandelion, which is that chap right there,
yep,
that comes up in spring. And traditionally, you'd be lambing, foaling, and calving around the time the dandelion comes up out of the soil. It is so mineral rich and nutrient rich that it feeds the dairy cows, lambs, sheep, horses, whoever is lactating, all the essential vitamins and minerals. The deep root absorbs up all those essential vitamins and minerals that a lactating animal needs. So you'd potentially decrease or eliminate your tetanus or your milk fever and all those kind of things. And what's so fascinating with Farming with Nature now is these old farm idioms are now becoming scientifically proven. So these graphs now that are here are showing that the high mineral and vitamin content in a sward that is purely dandelion, and comparing it to yarrow, caraway, perennial rye, sheep's burnet, chicory, clovers, alfalfa, which is, you know, also lucerne, which some people can't grow here in Ireland, but some can. But what's fascinating to me is these things are now becoming proven with science. For example, there's the old saying for thistles. Thistles are an issue for sheep because they puncture around the lambs or the ewes, and then you expose them to orf more easily and things like that. So an old idiom for thistles was, cut in May, you double their display. Cut in June, you've cut too soon. Cut in July, watch them die. And essentially, if you dissect a thistle, it's solid all the way through May and June. June, the middle starts softening. If you cut the thistle in July, it hollows out, the weather gets in, goes all the way down the root and kills the thistle. So it's another way to eliminate if you have a thistle problem. When I came back to the farm here, this would be, Granny died in Christmas 1996, and I came home in 1997. But they had been renting the land for the better part of 30 years to other farmers. And these other farmers were sheep farmers, beef farmers, horse farmers, all different kinds of farmers. And all they basically do is throw up an electric fence, throw fertilizer on it, put their stock in it, graze it to the bone, take their livestock off for the required month or 6 weeks during the winter, throw them back on the spring, fertilize it like crazy. So when I came home, the fields around here were basically ryegrass and thistles and nettles and over your head kind of population. So I spent the last 20 years eliminating the thistle very carefully because I don't want to eliminate the multi-species sward that lies beneath, which is the yarrow, the clover, the bird's foot trefoils, the vetches, which spread over the whole season. There's a whole variety of vetches. There's a whole variety of clovers. All of these are the legumes which feed the soil, the nitrogen. Then you have the yarrows, cow parsley. Cow parsley is fascinating for you as a vet. What's really interesting is that it is a anti-fly thing. And the livestock will eat the cow parsley leaves. And when they have the long celery-like stalks, the cows and the sheep will batter their heads like this. And the sap, they're basically putting a fly wipe on their heads themselves. And so it keeps the flies away. Then you have, there's all kinds of things that one could go on to, like all the different daisies treat stomach problems. If they have a stomach ache, they go and will eat some daisies. Or this spring, I had a ewe lamb that was going around and hunting out a celandine. And I was going, why is it hunting celandine in particular? And I went and looked it up, and it was a kind of, not antibacterial, what is that word I'm looking for?
I've left you down twice already with words, so I think it's going to be the third time. Look, I'm not sure what word you're looking for. So
anyway, she was self-medicating herself with the celandine. And the next day, she was, when you observe animals, you can see the body language that they're kind of slightly under the weather. Mm. They're not sick. They're just meh.
Yeah.
And so she was kind of meh. And she was hunting out the celandine, eating it. And the next day she was fine. Her ears were more pricked up. So it's basically this, what's fascinating to me is a lot of this old knowledge has been lost, but it's returning now with the scientific backing of research. And like the multi-species sward, if you have 85 or more different species of herbage, legumes, and grasses for your animals to forage, and you sort of mob graze it, so you don't let the livestock graze one spot continuously, which they all do. They have their favorite thing. You know, the Jenna Project in Germany has amazing research done, or Christina Jones on biodiversity. She was at the conference last November, October.
You sort of moved into the regenerative farming space.
Sorry, I kind of, yeah, did.
When you mentioned Christina Jones, and the reason that name resonates with me, because when I look at regenerative farming, it was probably Alan Savory's TED talk was the first time I was introduced to the principles of it. Heard lots of people talking about it, but I certainly, Christine Jones is fascinating when she talks about the science of soil and diversity and the endosphere, the ectosphere and the rhizosphere around plants. It's amazing. But when I look at regenerative farming, I'm very interested, but I sit in the middle, and maybe, you know, I feel that it's becoming another sort of division maybe at times where, you know, it's almost a religion at one side, and then there's people saying that it's nonsense. You're talking about feeding dandelions to animals to treat milk fever. Yield has changed.
No, prevent.
But, you know, so there's a huge spectrum there. And look, the reason I think Aginspire Conversations is about bringing different views to the table, opening my own mind, my own curiosity around these things, even though I sit very much in the middle. And maybe people will say that's a safe place to sit, but I think it allows me to look at things, and science is really important to me as well. I've had Tommy Boland talking about mixed species swards and the Smart Sward project last week, and Andre, who's a dairy consultant, a grazing consultant, talking about humic acid and soil health. So is there a common ground be some, you know, I certainly think there's people going down the full regenerative route, or is there sort of a marriage of principles that can be gained in commercial farms from regenerative?
You froze. Hello? Or you froze. You froze.
I froze. Can you see me now again?
Yes, I can. That last bit, Tommy Boland, and then you froze.
Okay. So I talked to Tommy Boland last week. He was talking about the Smart Swards project, really about diversity, 6 species swards, 12 species. Andre, my second guest, was talking about humic acid around reducing nitrogen and improving soil microbiome. And Bruce was talking about a subject you love, is dung beetles, but very much from a commercial perspective. So is there a marriage between regenerative agriculture and our commercial systems? Can we learn from each other, or is it just, you know, you're regenerative or you're not? You know, what are your views on that, Suzanna?
Oh, I think what's fantastic is that there are loads of farmers that are moving towards the multi-species sward and regenerative farming, because farmers care about their livestock and care about the land. For example, we have James Foley down in Waterford, and he's on a multi-species sward, and he's slowly converting. He is not lessened his numbers of livestock. He has kept them on an even, I think he's always milked, I can't remember if it's 200 or 250. And he, over the last few years, he's slowly been converting over to multi-species sward. He's saving a lot of money. His milk quantity has not dropped. His butter fat ratio has not dropped. His livestock density has not dropped. He is still very much a commercial farmer. Then there's Tom Stack in Limerick. He's another dairy farmer. I don't know how much or if his livestock ratio has dropped, but he's doing a kind of soil microbial Korean natural farming thing, which is absolutely fascinating. And he says his grass is growing like crazy. He's not using any fertilizers or herbicides. He's kind of gone to the organic extreme, but I think, I don't know if he's the same, but I think he's in around 250 livestock. And then you have Bruce, who is the dung beetles. And I think he's also said that he's retained his stocking rate, and he also is slowly converted to multi-species sward. And I think all the people that I know of and the farmers who are converting that are regenerative farmers aren't biblical about it. They are liking the bank balance because it improves the bank balance in that you don't have to put as many inputs in. For example, I had last year, I had just turned the ewes out into the orchard, and this guy who works for a whole series of farmers was visiting, and he said, "Oh, aren't you going to worry about bloat?" you know, that something awful is going to happen to the sheep. They're going to eat too many of the apples. And I said, no, because there's enough diversity in the sward here that they can self-medicate. They don't have bloat. Because he was saying, oh, we did this on a farm over such and such way, and the sheep came in and he had an awful time with bloat. And I said, what was the grass mix underneath the trees? And he said it was rye and clover. And I said, well, that's what it was. It was only 3 things in the mix: the windfall apples, the clover, and the rye. And I said, look in there and you'll see there's the 2 different plantains, there's different kinds of daisies, there's different trefoils, there's all these different things, so the sheep can go around and self-medicate. It means regenerative farming is, I think, it's the beginning, we're at the beginning of a evolution, revolution towards it, because the science is there to back it up. If you look at things like chagas and a lot of the research they're doing, they were taking leads from what was happening in New Zealand. And a lot of what's happening in New Zealand, you know, we're 20 years behind what they're doing, or 15 or 10. But I think, why can't we take the research from somewhere like the Jenna Project, which has all the research you need to show that you can have a commercially viable beef, sheep, tillage, dairy farm that means you're putting in less inputs and you have a healthier livestock, which means your vet bill is less.
Yeah, I'll be out of business, Suzanna.
You'll be out of business.
I'll be out of business. Maybe that's my secret. That's why I'm in the middle. No, but it's very interesting. I have lots of conversations with smart and interesting people like yourself who are talking about it. And I suppose I'm looking at it and I'm trying to make sense of it. And I think and it's the same as probably all our environmental challenges. A lot of us sit in the middle, and we're listening and trying to understand things before we make decisions. And I think farmers are there. I think there's certain trajectories that are on the horizon around farming from an EU perspective that are going to drive that forward. I still believe technology will play a role. I still believe that, I think ultimately farms will probably get bigger. That's the way it looks. But I'm wondering, I think we have to take some of these principles and apply them to our modern farming systems. Because if we don't, I think farming, and I think if anybody wants to really, I thought one of the most fascinating people on soil is Christina Jones, who I didn't get to see in Ireland. I mean, the science behind soil health. She's got a book, and there it is, A Soil Owner's Manual. Really fascinating.
It's John Stack. It's not Christina Jones.
Okay.
Or sorry, Stika.
John Stika.
Yeah, but I think farmers are going to have to start paying attention to their soil. Because like I said, from this book, Soil and Civilization, if we ignore the soil and the importance of the soil, if you have healthy soil with healthy organic matter and healthy biodynamics and mitochondria and funguses and all the important things in there, you have the ability to have healthy livestock and healthy land. If you look at Southeast England, this is a very interesting book. This book, Grass-Fed Nation. And I mean, the bibliography in the back, where he's got all the research from, is really fascinating. And basically, what's happening in Southeast UK, land which has been farmed and tilled and has not had livestock through the rotation for many, 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 many years, just tillage, all the chemicals and everything they're firing at it are not growing crops. So a lot of farmers are now bringing in, this is regenerative farming, are now bringing into their crop rotation livestock again. And they're also doing, there's a Cork farmer, part of BASE, the farming group called BASE, are fascinating and have some fantastic farmers in them, where they're doing 3 or 4 crops, tillage crops together. And the machines, technology like you're saying, separate out the pea from the rye, from the whatever, the three crops that are grown together. And the soil is recovering in those locations, as it is in Southeast UK. I think one thing that is vitally important to think about is the agricultural land mass of Ireland. Ireland, the country, sits inside the state of Virginia in the USA. The land mass of agricultural land in Ireland, within our landed boundaries, in some countries is a single ranch. In Brazil, Canada, USA, Australia. We cannot compete at a commodity level with those countries. We can't. We are a teaspoon drop in their ocean. What we should be doing, because we have the most magnificent land in the world for growing crops, for growing livestock, is we should be working on new routes to market. 1% of the world's population, if we really worked on regenerative agriculture, soil health, and dairy products, and beef, and sheep and lamb, like Achill lamb does, or like the Connemara Hill lamb does, or like the, what is she called? I can't remember, but she's opened her export of beef to Japan and all over the world of this Irish breed of cow, so that they're getting more money per kilo of beef. Or, for example, the belted Galloway are a lot of them, you don't have to feed them inputs like you do continentals. So if you have some of those more traditional, less continental animals, you can produce as much meat off of those cattle with less inputs. And then you have a route to market that is high end. For example, you could look at cheese markets from the Alps of France, where the cattle are traditionally grazed on mountain meadows. They have no grain inputs. The cheese is made. They make hundreds of millions of tons of cheese. And these are all small dairy farmers.
Or is that the Comte region?
Yes, exactly. And so Ireland could be the same. There's amazing cheeses in Ireland and things like that. Or you could take, what are some of the other things? Like Achill, Connemara lamb. Then you have velvet clad yogurt. It's all these routes to market need to upgrade. Farmers here in Ireland are so proud of what they do. I want them, my dream is for them to continue to being proud of what they're doing, but even more so in a greener way, so that there's more money in their back pocket. And I think we need newer and better routes to market is what we should be doing, not trying to compete with a commodity that there's no way we can compete with them. I mean, there's no way we can compete with the huge dairy farms that are happening in China or in Canada. I mean, it's...
and I know it's an ongoing debate, and I know probably my nature, if I was farming, I'd be looking at, and I'm so, like, Suzanna, I'm working with farms that are looking at that model of, I'm working on the animal health and a few parts of it that are looking at that in-stage direct route to market, diversification, and all that sort of wonderful stuff. But I do also see that, you know, farmers would say that we're competing very much with the other countries and the opportunities that are there. Have we got it right? No, there's lots of people that say that we haven't got it right. But there is, you know, at a national level, a national movement that farmers want to be part of cooperative systems that work for them, and don't want to be thinking about marketing and all those sort of things that sometimes you've got to do in those unique businesses. And I look at Comte cheese was under pressure during COVID-19, where people reverted back to, you know, we've kind of gone back to principles of safe, secure food. So that is an argument that's there that, I'm saying that if I was a farmer in the morning and I had beef cattle, I would be looking for diversification. That's just my nature. But a lot of people prefer to work within a system that works with them. I know some people will say it won't, some people will say it works very well, and we are competing internationally with the quality of product we produce. So I think there is a middle ground there. I think the principles of what you're saying make sense. But there is some sort of middle ground there when it's not as easy as it seems. And the people that you mentioned have put phenomenal work into. And I've met the sheep milk velvet cloud. I mean, phenomenal effort that goes in. You see a lot of them on Ireland's farmers' accounts. Phenomenal effort. So it's not as straightforward as we all go off and diversify. I think that's a difficult thing for farmers sometimes to digest and feel offended that, you know what, the current system is not working at all. In many ways it is.
Yes, no, I totally agree. It is not for all farmers to do this. So that's where you have a cooperative of farmers that work together, and some of them work at it. For example, I mean, the biggest dairy, do you know where the biggest dairy industry in the world is? The highest number of cattle producing the most milk in the world.
Well, the highest number of cows in any country is in India, isn't it?
That's also the biggest dairy industry. And most of those farmers will have 1 to 2 to 5 cows, yet they have the cooperatives. And they're all surviving on what they're doing. And that is an overpopulated continent that is doing amazing work for the farmers, which is one reason why they don't want the huge conglomerates to go in there, because it's actually feeding more people when it's dispersed to a larger community of people.
Sorry, Suzanna, we're really having trouble with ambulances and police here, so apologies.
Oh, I hope everything's okay.
Yeah, no, it's good. My office is on top of town here and there's a lot of activity there, but sorry. So no, India is an example, you say, of where smaller farms can integrate into a bigger system. Yes,
like the Comté cheese, but also during COVID, a lot of small producers actually got more into the market of selling directly to clients, like Velvet Cloud. Okay, they didn't recover enough of their restaurant trade, if you will, but they've got a huge, a broader spectrum now for when the restaurant trade comes back in. But the same can be said of the lettuce or tillage farmers, because not everybody goes and buys lettuce from the supermarket. So we've seen that in California, where thousands of acres of lettuces and peas and vegetables were plowed back into the land because the restaurant trade wasn't buying those green leaves to decorate the plate. So you can say that COVID hit all the different sections of the industry, from the niche products all the way to the huge industrial ones. So I think you can't say it was just the Comté cheese people who were affected, because it was pretty much across the board, affecting food production everywhere. And I would never in my wildest dreams think or tell every farmer that they have to do their own advertising. I happened to slip into it very well and figured out how it works. And, well, not really. I think I survive it, maybe is a better way to say it, is I survive how I manage it. But I still think, for example, Barbara Kingsolver is an American authoress and writer and journalist and novelist as well. And she's from an area in Southwest Virginia. And when her parents were getting elderly, she was living in Tucson, Arizona, and she moved back to Southwest Virginia. Southwest Virginia, the area she moved into, is an Appalachian area of the poorest of poor. There was nobody around there. And so she moved back to look after her elderly parents. And she slowly, her husband, you know, in moving back, they did a garden and they decided to sell a few vegetables of a Saturday morning in this rural town that was mostly boarded up. I mean, it was the back of beyond of abysmal. You probably would think Deliverance was happening there, if you know the movie, if you know.
I know, I've seen the movie, yeah.
Okay, so basically they started doing that. Other people in the area started contributing. They said, well, why don't we open a restaurant on a Friday and a Saturday and a Sunday of local produce? They started doing that. After, I think it was 15 or 20 years, they started a community on a road that is now worth to that community $350 million.
Wow. Wow.
It is possible. Now, Ireland, this is a part of the state of Virginia in the southeast, the poorest of poor. So it is possible for these things to occur. What happened was the artists moved into the area, craft people moved into the area, more food producers moved into the area. Farmers, young people started coming in and farming on small holdings, like the few pigs here and the few sheep there, and a few cows and to milk and a few beef there. Also making, pickled this or jams that. And so it was a combination of awakening a community that came alive, kind of referring back to Wendell Berry. It was the community, it was the rural community got revitalized. The young people didn't want to leave anymore and go to the city because they could earn an income within this community. And it was all smallholders. There were no big, huge industrial farmers. So to nix a community that can go from dirt piss poor to being worth an economy to a rural area worth $350 million speaks volumes to people who can inspire that and the community that can grow around it. So again, you go back to people like Wendell Berry saying what's missing in the rural areas is a bigger sense of community and pride, because all the young are leaving and farmers are under so much pressure to lower their prices at the farm gate to the commodity level that mental health is a huge issue in the farming community. So if there's a way to get new and better routes to market and get people inspired behind this kind of a movement, it is absolutely possible to resuscitate this. Because if you think about it, for an island like Ireland, we are a spit in the Atlantic Ocean compared to most countries around the world. But we're the only country in the world that most countries celebrate in March with St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, you don't have to tell me. I'm very proud of the country. I think we box above our weight in many, whether it be literature, arts, and farming. And I think you mentioned some very interesting things there. And I think the idea of community, it's interesting because I'm very much involved with my work currently in a number of projects looking at animal health that are involved in bigger projects. And some of them do involve bringing that community roots back in, really in linking soil health all the way through to human health, through nutrition as well. And it's I think it's going to be a very interesting decade ahead. And I pick a decade because I think the decade, that'll be a lot. I think we've a lot of things to get right in that decade. And I'm an optimist. I believe we will. I think it'll be a multitude of things that'll be involved. I think regenerative agriculture will have a role to play. People like yourself will be there to inspire people and have those conversations. Maybe, Suzanna, challenge the status quo a little bit as well.
Absolutely. But I mean, like you're talking about health. For example, we want the soil health. And one of the vital ingredients of that is the dung beetle. Because the dung beetle, particularly the door dung beetle, so the manure is on the top and the door dung beetle goes down into the ground and brings the manure down. But when it's digging the soil up, it's bringing a lot of minerals up from deep in the soil, which then feeds the grass that the cows or the sheep or the horses or whoever is going to eat. And if you concentrate on farming for the dung beetle, you are going to revitalize your soil, which in turn is healthy for your livestock. So it's preventative medicine. So you get those deep manganese, magnesiums, all those things that are leached and poured through the soil. You also get better soil drainage. And when you have the root structures going deep into the soil of salad burnet and things like that, and it sucks up and brings to the other plants that are across the top. I mean, one of the most fascinating things is if you have a patch of nettles and you chop it down, the livestock won't touch it for the 2 or 3 days because of the stings for obvious reasons. Nettles traditionally are on the richest plot of land. So it's got the best vitamins and minerals. So if you have a sick animal, you can chop the nettles, let them dry for 3 days as a hay, toss them about in a bit, and feed them to the animal. And it is it's a mixture of what the animal needs that science hasn't caught up with, as far as vitamins and minerals and all those kind of things are. Or they're catching up with it if you look at the science behind the dandelion and how much is in there. So there's a lot of things that science is catching up with, or that needs to have more attention paid to it. The fascinating book, I don't have it here, is to do with the microbiology in our own bellies. And what they found is the healthier that is, the healthier our brain is. And
that research, actually, the microbiome, the influence of our mood, the microbiome and our mood, it's the science is there. And that microbiome is the same microbiome in soil that potentially, and our ruminant animals have more microbiome than probably any species because of the
exactly
digested. Suzanna, I'm going to leave you with the final thought. I think we could talk forever, and I know you would. I suppose a couple of things. A very smart person said to me recently, he said, don't underestimate the power of biology over chemistry and understanding biology. And I will keep an open mind to it, and conversations with people like yourself will keep me in check to help understand, particularly about regenerative farming. I wish you well, and I look forward to meeting you again in the post-COVID era when we can all travel about a bit more. I suppose for me as well, you've a big following and support on social media. I know they'll be watching this, but how people can go and maybe look at the work you do in your small business and how they can support it. What's your website? How can people find out more about the products you produce in particular?
Okay, my website is Zwarbtles Ireland.
I'm going to share it in the blog as well, but just tell people.
Okay, that's how you spell Zwarbtles, and it's Zwarbtles Ireland. I'm also on YouTube as Zwarbtles Ireland. My Twitter page is at Zwarbtles IE, and the YouTube channel as well, and Instagram and all those kind of things. And I have to start categorizing my YouTube. I'm being given lectures by people that they want to look at all my videos about dung beetles. So I should put them all in the category of dung beetles, or about environmental farming or regenerative farming. And I still haven't done that, but I've got so much to do. I mean, I'm writing my second book.
Wow.
As well. So
what's the second book on, Suzanna?
Well, the first book, as you know, is Bodacious, which is now in 4 other languages: Japanese, German, Italian, and French. And the second one is going to be about Inca, the world's smallest sheepdog. And just so that people, I wrote this in a humorous way, with intelligence to allow people to be cozy and reading and learning. It was using animal characters to educate about food and farming, because we have such an issue with people who don't understand where our food comes from. And so Inca is the dog aspect, which means I can talk a lot about shit and dung beetles. and how important shit and dung beetles are, and that we don't want to be, now I'm going to pronounce this wrong, but
Coprophagia.
Yes.
Finally, at the very end of the interview,
gorillas.
At the very end of the interview, Suzanna, I've come with one word that I knew, coprophagia, which is a word not too many people should know or want to know about. Listen, you are an inspiration, and I'll leave the last words with you. You know, I leave the last words with you. And I know you have your own following and tribe and people who follow you and they're with you. But I do feel that in all aspects of agriculture, whether it be intensive, regenerative, organic, we need to be talking more to each other on a level playing field. That we're sort of not all against each other in this race. That we're probably, and I think Jack Bobo, the futurist, he said we all need to be working together from a global perspective, and certainly with the view of more collaboration and understanding each other. And I think that's why I started Aginspire Conversations, was to probably have the different views of people and bring them together for my own curiosity as well as others. So I'm going to leave the final words to you, Suzanna. You're reaching behind you.
I'm reaching because I'm about to run out of power.
Okay, I thought.
Hold on, there. I've just plugged it in.
I thought that was a charger, or I thought maybe it was a necklace from Southeast Asia given to you by a tribesman about wisdom and nature, but it's an iPhone charger. I'm going to leave the last words with you, Suzanna. I'm going to leave the final thoughts with you. You spoke about curiosity. You're an adventurer. You are an environmentalist, and you said yourself you have dreams about the way the future is. So I'll leave the last words with you.
Well, I definitely believe in communicating with all farmers. To me, farmers are a lot of the times the most intelligent and sensible people. And when they get to understand other issues and aspects of their land that they might not be aware of, they're very good and quick at solving problems and issues, because there is no other industry in the world where you have to know midwifery, plumbing, electricity, mechanics, so many different things. Farmers are a unique breed that are like MacGyvers to do with the environment and farming. So I'm a huge fan of farmers, and even the most industrial, techno-efficient farmer is very interesting having a conversation with them, whether it's to do with solving an issue or a conundrum that they have within their set skills and how they solve those problems and issues. And I have never really had a and I've had people who've baited me as other farmers, but I think that farmers have a instinct for what is right for them and their environment. And what's really interesting is the number of farmers that I have that stop in out of the blue here and have these conversations with me over the years. Like I could talk about somebody who came 10 years ago and now comes back to me and is frightfully excited about the woodcock and the snipe that are back on their land again, or the buzzards and things like that, because they've changed something around. It could be just that they let that corner go wild, but they're still doing the ryegrass, clover, sward over here. So I'm not against any farmers at all. I am for civilization and farmers and for the environment, and hoping that we can save ourselves from ourselves and feed ourselves healthily. I think the soil is a vital ingredient for people to grasp and understand. And I think a lot of agricultural schools don't teach enough about soil itself. They talk about the chemistry to put in the soil for a result. They don't talk about the microbial life, the extraordinariness of what those 6 inches underneath all farmland, how that feeds us and things like that. So I would hope that people get more informed, more information, and that more farmers get involved with multi-species swards, because it, in the end, will save their bank balance, whether they're going to stick to the commodity prices for dairy, or whether they're going to go and make an exotic cheese or ice cream. The multi-species sward will revolutionize farming and technology.
Suzanna, I think you're very passionate, and that passion is palpable. You've also fantastic energy and enthusiasm for what you do, and I wish you great success with that. I look forward to reading your second book. You're incredibly industrious as well, and I'm sure we'll have many more conversations. But I think you've challenged the status quo today. You've put ideas in people's heads maybe, and I would suggest anyone who wants to know more about soil, follow Christine Jones. Maybe it's somebody I'd like to have on to chat with.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, that was somebody I thought was her knowledge of soil and the microbiome was fascinating. So,
and she's amazing videos to watch.
Yeah, that's where I watched her. I mean, I have all these books behind me just for show. I'm not reaching back for them. It's all to make me look more intelligent than I actually am.
No.
Well, Suzanna, look, thank you so much for your time. Continued success. I'll have all the details of your website and where to follow you. Everyone knows you anyway, but particularly for your website for people to check out, because it's
or the Twitter page, which is where I'm always uploading stuff.
Yeah, and fair play to you. I've started taking a step back from social media for several reasons, but you really are, you're engaging, and your tribe is following. I was mentioned in a post with you, and I looked at my phone, and there was like about 100 notifications. So you have a huge following. That's all I have to say. I thank you for your time, Suzanna, and continued success, and keep that energy and passion up.
You're most welcome, and thank you very much.
Good, and hopefully we'll meet again soon.
I hope so.